Okay, well, I think we're ready to get started again. We'll continue. I'm sorry about that little delay. I started the recording again. Computer says it's going dead, it's going dead. So, okay, but our next broadleaf weed that we were looking at is the ground ivy. And some people will call it creeping Charlie. There's also a perennial that we call creeping Jenny. Often they just kind of grow together. So we have creeping Charlie and creeping Jenny. I just let them grow. But creeping Jenny is a really pretty perennial plant though. But this is a perennial weed. It will have the square stems. It is in the mint family. And so when you crush leaves, it'll kind of smell minty. Gets a little purple flowers on it, but it is more low to the ground. And you can, I mean, it's very easily distinguished from the henbit and the dead nettle, I mean, even though it's got the purple flowers too. So it will reproduce by rhizomes, and it also has a fibrous root system. So that can make it very hard to control, especially if it gets at the base of trees, and it will start growing up trees, or it will start growing up the side of your house. I mean, it's almost as, you know, like wild ivy or English ivy. It just would be very hard to control once it took place and got hooked to the ground. Then we have buttercup. This is a bulbous buttercup. Buttercup is just a common name for a lot of different weeds and flowers. So, our daffodils that come up, many people call them buttercups, but buttercup is a weed, a pasture weed. Okay, kind of a taller yellow flowered plant that we see. That's called buttercup also. So this is a bulbous buttercup, which is more lower growing. You can see this, the foliage is very similar to the creeping Charlie. So that can be a little hard to identify. So might have to key that one out or take some good pictures and do some research, to distinguish it between the creeping Charlie and whether it's buttercup. But this would be a perennial. It's low growing, yellow flowers, about 8 to 24 inches in height. The base thickens into a structure known as a corm that resembles a bulb. So it reproduces by seed and dividing of the corms. So this might actually be something, it's got a pretty yellow flower on it. You may not consider it a weed. It may be a pretty flower that you want to let it grow, especially if it's in a woodland area, and it's not causing problems, just let it grow. Dandelions. Dandelions, of course, are perennials. Many people hate them. They just dislike them completely, do not want them in their landscape. Unfortunately, they are one of the first food for our bees. And so it's kind of important to leave some of them out if you can, so that the bees can forage and get the nectar on there. But it does have a deep taproot, very hard to control. If you can eradicate them early while they're young, before the seed head forms, you're going to be better off. But of course, we all have children and grandchildren that like to blow the little things everywhere. And so then we have dandelions everywhere the next year. So dandelions can be eaten. The dandelion greens, you can make a tea. You can make dandelion wine. I've heard people say, I've never tried any of this stuff. And you can fry the flowers. Oh, good. All right. Well, are they tasty? They are tasty. Okay. Because I ate one once and it was like bitter. And I was like, okay. They're good. Okay. We have to fix this some up. Okay. But these are mostly propagated by seed. There's our plantain again. Actually, plantain is not a bad plant. You can eat it, and it also adds some nutrients back to your soil. And so when I'm pulling the plantain, I try to catch it before it goes to seed. And I will just pull up the clumps of plantain and break it up and lay it back on the soil and just let it naturally decompose back into the soil. So, you can pull those seed heads off and then kind of compost the rest of it. But it is very good for the soil and is edible. So it does get a thin stalk, narrow stalk of the flower. Pokeweed. Pokeweed is a perennial. Now my internet connection's unstable. Perennial weed, large growing, 3 to 10 foot tall. You can see it flowering and going to seed now. Of course, pokeweed, when it's young, you can eat the younger tender leaves, but it can be poisonous as that plant grows into maturity. You definitely do not want to eat the berries as they are toxic. And even the leaves you have to be careful of after they mature. There's kind of a process that you have to go through of boiling and rinsing and boiling and rinsing to be able to actually eat those. So I guess while they're young and tender, it's fine. I think it would be quite a chore to have to boil them and boil them and boil them just to eat them. So, but I guess people like them that much, they'll do it. So. Okay. We had somebody here in the room said that they kind of pull them up like when they look like asparagus. Just pull them up and eat the tender stems and leaves and everything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, birds love the berries. Yeah, they will not. Yeah, the birds won't die. Yeah, they make those pretty splatters all over your car, don't they? Yep. And they can be used as a dye, like if you dye cloth or wool or something like that. You want natural dyes. The berries make a very good dye for doing that. So this looks like, what is this? This is our nut sedge again, and this shows a closer up picture of the nodules that are in the ground. And so you think you've got it all pulled up, but those little nodules or little nutlets will stay in the soil and they'll come back as a whole new plant. So again, very important to try to keep these things from going to seed. Now it comes in. Again, a little bit more on the yellow nut sedge. It is tolerant of low mowing, so it will just keep coming back. Has rhizomes, but produces mainly by the tubers, is a perennial, produces by seed also. White clover, some people do consider this a weed. Has stems that root at the node, has very shallow root system, trifoliate leaves, white flowers on short stems, difficult to fully eradicate. But again, it also has, good points to it that it's a nitrogen fixer in the soil. And so if you'll just leave it there, keep mowing it as the compost goes back into the soil, it will fix nitrogen and actually give nitrogen to your fescue crop that you want to have. Okay, weeds and how they spread. So seed production, one lamb's quarter can produce 100,000 seeds per year. And some studies reveal over 500,000 in a year. So
The computer's not moving.
The computer's not moving.
We're still on white clover.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it said my internet was unstable, so maybe just give it a second and see if it comes back. Okay. Those of you online, is it moving forward now?
No.
No.
All right, hold on 1 second.
No.
The internet.
The screen changed.
Okay, yep.
I was looking on September 14th, the vegetable garden base management thing, which is that chapter 11? Because I can't find the booklet that reads exactly what it says. In-person speaker.
Oh, hold on. I'm trying to fix the internet connection.
Okay.
No, okay.
To your actual, you have a credential through.
All right. Can everybody see and hear again?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm trying to get back here where it was. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so here we go again. Trying this part. All right, we looked at this one, the lamb's quarters. Talked about that. So basically, I guess this is still talking about the lamb's quarter. Produces a lot of seeds. It will they'll land and germinate in disturbed environments. Those tiny seeds can spread over many miles, over many offspring. And so if you have recently disturbed soil and those seeds land there, they're going to germinate and take over. So seedlings are going to compete poorly with established plants. So weed seeds need to know when other plants are absent, I guess. They respond to cues associated with the absence of plants, near surface conditions, and soil disturbance is going to cause those seeds to germinate. So, and I mentioned seed bank, a couple different types. A soil seed bank is just the natural storage of seeds in the soil, which means they are dormant. They're in the soil of most ecosystems. They've just been down there in the soil. They've been dormant. Once the soil is disturbed, those seeds will come up, and then the plants will start to grow again. They'll seed, and then they'll continue to deposit seeds. So that's how you end up with a seed bank of a problem weed. I don't know. We had the question, why did they not rot? I guess some of them will, and then some of them will survive, and they'll come. Yeah, true. I know, but that palm or amaranth, they'll stay in down there forever. And then once they get a little sunlight or they get disturbed and they get a little water, boy, they'll come right up. So yeah, that's what a soil seed bank is. And a lot of, most seeds come up from a very few large plants like your redroot pigweed. They just put off millions of seeds. And so they become a problem very quickly. Now, a lot of agriculture weeds depend on humans for dispersal. We can be part of the problem. When you walk through a field or something and you collect the weed seeds on your pant legs, on your socks, and then you walk through your garden, then you've moved those seeds around and planted them yourself. In feed grain, velvet leaf can be spread. Seeds can definitely be spread through manure. Unless you compost to above 180 degrees for about 6 months. I mean, you need to constantly turn that pile or the weed seeds are going to survive. So depending on the seed, but if you're composting, it needs to be above 100 degrees for a certain amount of time to even kill those weed seeds. So, but they can also spread, on tractor tires, go from one field to the next. They can be on your machinery or on combines. That's why it's very important to, clean your equipment in between fields, especially if you're going from an area that has a high weed influence and you're going into another, field, spray off your equipment in between, try to clean off, get as much debris and everything off before you move from one field to another. And, that would be farm. Of course, if you're in your garden, just clean your tools that you've been gardening with and make sure you're not packing around any extras, any tag-alongs. Okay. That was weird. Velvet leaf is a really, really pretty plant. Internet connection unstable again. I hope we don't lose it again. If we do, I think I'm going to give up. Okay, so your velvet leaf, large, very soft feeling leaves, easy to identify. Just keep moving on. It is a stationary perennial, problem in hay fields and pastures. Usually not really competitive the first year, but it's easily eliminated by tillage. They do establish from seed. If you need to control it in adjacent habitats. So from one field to another, if they're not controlling the velvet weed over here, then it's going to come over to your field. It's going to be a continual problem. So wandering perennials, they spread by thickened storage, the roots, the stolons or rhizomes. And so you see the Bermuda grass that will be coming up in cracks in concrete or cracks in your driveway. They're just very determined weeds. So key points about the spread of weeds, breaking up perennials promotes sprouting. Okay, so like if you break up Johnson grass, you just till over it, all those little pieces are going to turn into new plants, and then you're just kind of worsening your problem. Now, if you were to till Johnson grass when the temperatures are like below 20 degrees and you want to go ahead and get out there and get some control on them, you can bring those roots up to the surface and then, they will freeze and die. So if you can expose them to either heat or freezing, that can be a way to control them. Like tillage. Like I said earlier, the absence of plants always stimulates that germination. Anytime you've got bare soil, you're going to have the opportunity for weeds to come creeping in. So we also said they persist in the soil for many years and die at a constant rate too. Produce many, many small seeds. Seed size controls the depth of emergence. Some will just barely have to land on the soil. Others need to be covered, just like our vegetables, other seeds that we would plant for desired crops. So, and it's very easy to bring in new weed species. When you bring home a plant or a tree or something from Lowe's, and you notice in the container, there's weeds in there. So you want to get rid of those and not plant them with your tree. Or else you're just spreading the weed problem from where that plant had been grown and the weeds got into it in the nursery. So, let's see, undisturbed weed seeds tend to persist longer than seeds that are subjected to periodic tillage. So seeds that are deep in the soil, they're stored below that germination zone. Just takes a little opening, a little water, a little sunlight, and they will start to germinate. And then they will persist for decades. Okay, so read your textbooks, periodicals. There's a lot of good programs or apps that you can download. I use iNaturalist a lot, but there's a lot of other ones out there that can help you identify weeds just right on site. You just take a picture of it and plug it in, and it will give you suggestions of what it might be. And then you can go and further key it out, use an identification book or go online and put in a description. But if you can keep a diagnostic toolkit, a hand lens, having a basic hand lens is a good idea. Know the life cycle of the weed or of the pest. And is the weed the cause or the effect of the problem? And then make sure you confirm your diagnosis, check with your county extension agent or, garden center, co-op, and help them, let us help you identify the problem before you just start spraying. So control is best as a buffet approach. So various methods to reach the goal. Several servings may be required. So you may have to treat several times or, continually pull those weeds before you get them under control. Okay, so maintaining a healthy garden is here are some tips on managing the weeds. Going to be maintaining that healthy garden, prevent seed production, prevent seed germination, eliminate the weed seedlings, and then target susceptible growth stages. And so you want to identify that weed, the life cycle, the habitat, integrate your control methods. You may do preventative, which is culture control. Just get out there hand weeding, hoeing, removing those weeds. Mechanically, there are biological controls and cultural and chemical controls. Sanitation, you like to have a weed-free seed and plant material, weed-free topsoil. So you can bring in a problem. A lot of times, if you bring in topsoil from another area, you can bring in weed problems. Even in some of your cheaper compost, bag compost, things like that, they can have weed seeds in them, a certain amount. So you just have to be very careful and identify them as they come up and control as you go. So let's see, just preventing weeds from going to seed. So stale seed bed, that's where you cultivate the soil and the weeds are allowed to germinate, and then they are killed by another round of minimal soil disturbance. You can either till over them again, or you can use a flame weeding, you can use a herbicide. But the key there is to just barely let them germinate. The soil is cultivated, the plant grows back, then you put in your control method. Your row spacing, the closer you can put your plants together, you have less open ground. You're going to have less weed problems if you keep that ground covered. Cover crops. We're going to talk about that in another presentation, but there are a lot of cover crops that you can use that will help you control the weeds, especially in between your rows. We've talked about that. And so the cover crops, they reduce the light needed for germination. They kind of smother the weeds, and they can add nutrients back to your soil. So it's just a good part of your overall management practice. Tillage, we don't want to work the soil too deeply. We talked about that last week. Or you don't want to work it too much, not necessarily too deeply, but you can overwork the soil and you basically turn it into a real silty soil that it loses its characteristics. It loses the texture. It has no aeration. It has, will not hold weeds. It will be very hard, compact easily. So you can overtill your ground. And so that's why I like to use cover crops to kind of put this, put back in what you're taking out of the soil. Of course, hand removal, hoeing, use of mulches, and mowing will all help keep those weeds under control. So your tillage, can control many weeds, but it can also damage the roots of the crops around. So if you've got corn that's pretty good size, maybe getting close to harvest, and you run a rototiller in between the rows, you're very likely to hit the roots of that corn and cause problems. So if you could just maybe have a cover crop planted in between, maybe have some buckwheat or something like that, clover in between, that eliminates having to weed and prevents that damage to the crop roots. And if you are planting under trees, you can really damage the tree, by just a little bit of tilling, a couple inches, around the trees. If you're tilling up those roots, you can really damage the tree and it'll start to go into decline. And so we don't really recommend that you till and do a lot of planting right underneath the roots of trees. Of course, common sense tells us hand pulling and hoeing. It's good exercise. Just make sure you stretch before you go out there. It's always a good thing. So mulches. I like using just a natural or an organic mulch. Your weed barrier fabrics tend to cause problems with woody ornamentals, your trees and shrubs, because the roots will actually, they're trying to grow upwards instead of downwards, because that weed barrier fabric is keeping the moisture from going down into the ground deeply where it needs to grow. And so the roots are kind of spoiled and they grow right there on the top. And so if we have a drought or something, they dry out very easily. And so the weed barrier fabric can be a problem around your trees and shrubs. It can hurt their growth. And then, you always end up with the weeds coming in from the air or the birds dropping them and such like that. They end up getting in there anyway. So I'm not a big fan of the weed barrier fabric. Just a good layer of mulch and hand weeding will usually take care of the problem. So black plastic mulch is not recommended at all. The plastic does not allow for water and air to get down to the plant roots. So I don't know how many times I've gone out and I've looked at trees, especially older trees, and the plastic is still just all wrapped up and wound up where the tree was trying to grow, but it just grew around that plastic and it girdled it and, eventually caused the trees to die. So we don't recommend any black plastic mulch, and but unless you're using it in like a vegetable production, like we talked about earlier, the plastic culture, where you're going to remove it after the season is done. Your irrigation line is usually under the plastic or under the weed barrier fabric, and then it's removed. But for a permanent situation, no plastic, no weed barrier. Okay. So just your natural mulches, a lot of materials available, straw, wood chips, pine straw, sawdust, newspaper. You can lay down newspaper and then put the wood chips on top of it. I do that in my garden. I'll put cardboard down where I want paths and then put wood chips down, or I'll put straw or leftover hay, things like that. Like I said, anything that will cover that ground surface and keep the sunlight from those weed seedlings. Now, solarization is something that is effective, but it does take time, and it takes your garden out of production right during the summer when you want it to be producing. So you may think about solarizing different areas each year, kind of get into a crop rotation. So if you want to kill off this one area, you're going to put your plastic out. It's clear, you need a clear plastic, and it needs to be during the hot months of summer. And it can take 2 to 4 months for it to actually work. The soil temperature under that plastic needs to reach at least 120 to 130 degrees to kill the weed seeds. So, and that plastic has to be into place 4 to 6 weeks, and it's generally effective about 2 to 3 inches deep. So you're still going to have some weed seeds come back. So mowing is effective on broadleaf weeds than grasses. Grasses just like to be mowed because they grow right back. But it will, yeah. Okay, I think we went over that. We'll go. Okay, let's look at organic control. Make sure you identify the weed plant. To remove the weeds, make sure the soil is friable, not wet, not dry. We only want to work the soil when it is friable, not when it's really wet. And we talked about that last week. Just manually pull up, dig up those seedlings when they're small. Attempt to get all the roots, but do not shake the clump of soil as it may spread the roots back into the area. Remove the plant before it flowers to prevent seed spread. Cover that exposed soil with leaf mulch, wood chips, and you can use full strength white vinegar on the leaves of the plant, and that will kill the above ground portions, but it will not kill the root system, so they will come back. Okay, chemical controls, your herbicides. Herbicide is a chemical that is used to control, suppress, or kill weeds by interrupting some normal plant growth process. So before you use a herbicide, you need to understand what the plant is that you're wanting to control. What is it growing around? You know, always read and understand the herbicide label. Some of these herbicides are safe, and even one is called over the top. You can use it over the top of most perennials, woody shrubs and such, and it will control grasses. But if you have ornamental grasses and you spray that chemical, then you're going to kill your ornamental grasses. So make sure you know what you're dealing with, what you want to control, and what your desirable plants are. So, and just be careful about following the mixing, the application, the storage of these chemicals. Just follow those carefully. Like I said earlier, you know, if it says 1 ounce, don't put 2. Maintain and calibrate your equipment. If you're using larger equipment, with most home gardeners, we're just using hand sprayers and things like that. If you're looking at larger equipment, you would need to calibrate that and make sure that it's putting out the correct amount. And do not use on plants that are not listed on the label. So herbicide selection factors, make sure you identify the problem species and identify the herbicides labeled for that site. Like if you've got Bermuda grass and you're trying to control maybe fescue in your Bermuda grass, you know, you're going to want to know both things. Determine the tolerance of desirable plants, integrate some management objectives, and obtain suitable safety and application equipment. So if you are spraying chemicals, you know, even Roundup, okay, you need to wear full shoes, you know, boots, something like that covers your feet. Make sure your skin is covered, really. Long sleeve shirt, long pants, boots. Don't be out there spraying Roundup in your shorts and flip flops. You don't want to get that on your skin. So herbicide, they can, you know, the classifications of herbicides. Okay, one is a contact. It sprays, you spray it on there and it directly kills injury to the plant tissue, does not readily translocate, and that'd be something like Diquat. Systemic would be something like Roundup. Roundup translocates in the plant tissue. It moves from the chlorophyll molecules through the plants to the roots and kills it all the way down to the roots. A pre-emergent, such as preen, that is applied before weed germination, and that's to you know, prevent the weeds from completely germinating and coming up and going into maturity. So a pre-emergent like preen will not control the weeds that have already emerged. You have to catch it before they germinate. So you put that on beforehand. Post-emergent would be something like Roundup or 2,4-D. It's sprayed after the weeds have emerged, but it will not control, you know, the the seeds that have not germinated yet. Roundup has to grab onto a chlorophyll molecule in order to work. So we have selective and non-selective. So some of our plants like preen, weed be gone, 2,4-D is like 2,4-D is more for broadleaf type weeds. And so it's going to, you'll see on the label, kills the weed, not the lawn. Okay, and that would be a selective herbicide. Weed be gone, the same thing. Non-selective generally kills everything. So Roundup, Finale, Roundup, the real name, scientific name is glyphosate. And so anything that has glyphosate in it is going to kill off everything. So your annual weedy grasses like your crabgrass and your goosegrass, they're easily controlled using those pre-emergent, catch those weed seeds before they germinate completely. And your perennial, your broadleaf weeds are usually best controlled with post-emergent sprays. Once the plant comes up and it's young, you can spray it, but there are some herbicide options for those broadleaf weeds. Some examples, pre-emergent, I guess barricade, dimension would be a couple that are very homeowner friendly. Some of these can only be used by commercial, but these all here are ones that you can use, homeowners can use. Post-emergent, 2,4-D is an auxin inhibitor. It's basically a growth hormone. So you will see the plant start to curl up on itself. And basically it just messes up its hormones and it kills it in that way. You'll also see, like if you spray 2,4-D and it's hot and the wind's blowing, you'll also see that curling on trees and desirable crops too. So again, you have to be careful about the wind speed, the temperature, things like that if you're spraying for weeds. So there's just some examples of your post-emergent herbicides. Make sure that you're spraying, be responsible when you're spraying. Look at the temperature, the timing, the labeled rates, and do your cleanup of your equipment afterwards. And here is some herbicide drift damage. A lot of your lawn broadleaf weed control, one commonly used is called Trimac, and it has dicamba in it as well as 2,4-D. And so it's kind of a triple whammy, and it does volatilize and it drifts as it gets warm. And you can spray it in the morning when it's 70 degrees. And if it's 80 degrees by noon, 85 degrees, and that chemical will volatilize and it will drift. And then that's when you get off target damage. And so this is a tomato. I know it's kind of hard to see, but the stem is thickened. It's starting to curl under itself. Very easy to recognize once you've seen it a couple different times. But I look for patterns of damage when I look at a landscape. First of all, person's having problems with their trees. Okay. I'll go out and I'll look. And the first thing I do is I look at the ground. Okay. If there's no broadleaf weeds there, then I know that a broadleaf weed killer has been used on that lawn or possibly the yard next door. And so you look for drift patterns, patterns of damage throughout the different trees, the perennials, all the plants that are within that landscape. And then you can kind of identify the drift and you maybe even be able to see where it came from. So if you don't treat your lawn, but your neighbor does, then you're likely to get drift from it. I mean, it's very, very possible. So the tomatoes. Okay. All right. Here. Oh, wait a minute. Too fast. Okay. Okay, here there, I can't really see this, but there's areas of patterns of circles. I don't even see what you see. I'm trying to read the notes, but it doesn't make sense. So the herbicide residual, okay, damage from pasture herbicides. Okay, so if you've started a new garden and you get some manure, free manure from somebody, and you know those cattle or livestock have eaten from fields that are treated with certain chemicals and you put that in your garden, it can come through and cause your plants to die, not germinate and come up. So be very careful about your manure, because even composting does not get rid of the chemicals in there. So if you really want to build up your soil, you can do that through cover cropping and the addition of compost that you know is safe, things like that. But live manures or green manure crops, things that you till in, that may be more helpful, especially these days when our fields are consistently sprayed. So our manure is going to have some residuals in it. Okay. All right, questions? I think we're about to the end.
Putting down the wood
Mhm.
in between the rows.
Mhm.
And I have so many wood chips, but somebody told me not to do that because as they are decomposing, it's a fresh wood chip.
Yeah.
As they're decomposing, that actually takes the nutrients away from.
Yes, if you're using them, okay, the question was on using fresh wood chips like in between the rows. Okay, so you're keeping those wood chips away from your desirable plant, away from their root zone. So if you put the fresh wood chips or sawdust right up next to a plant, yes, it's going to steal the nitrogen away and can actually burn up the plants. But if you like want to just put a layer, maybe do some cardboard and do mulch on top of that in between the rows, keep it away from your desirable plants. I would say about 8 to 10 inches. Yeah, far away from it. So you could still create a path and then, have your desirable plants off to the side.
How long before I can use them? Like,
Usually, it usually takes 6 months to a year for those wood chips to compost completely. And so, I mean, if you wanted to put them on in the fall and let them lay, like if you already have your garden laid out and you've got certain paths and stuff, you could leave them lay, let them break down. You could, putting them on in the fall, is really going to help them decompose. You could till them under, or right, right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. But they will break down. Just keep them away from the base of your desired plants. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions here? Oh, okay. Yes. I'm not sure what the scientific answer for that is. I guess for some reason the clear plastic allows the heat to go down further into the soil. Okay, where the light is going through, it's going to the soil on down into the ground. The black plastic will create heat, but it deflects it, and it will only kill like the top layer. So
I use billboard. Those big billboard things.
okay,
It kills everything.
yeah,
But they're saying this is not-
it didn't kill it deep enough. It probably came back, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want
Yeah.
it to not come back because
Mhm.
that's what I wanted it to.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Somebody asked me, what the app was. I suggested iNaturalist, but that's just one of many apps that are available to help ID plants and weeds. Oh, Plant Snap. Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay. Well, sorry about our connections, our difficulties tonight. I will let you all know I'm going to have surgery next week, and so we will still have class. I'll let you know if we're going to meet in person while I'm out, because that could be an issue. I've got to have surgery next Wednesday, and so I will be out for a week to 7 days. So, but I will keep you all updated on what's going on there, and one way or another, we'll see you next week. All right.
I got a stupid question. Yeah, I
Yes.
got a stupid question. On September 14th, it says vegetable garden basics management, water and weed. Which booklet is that? I'm looking at 11 and where's the other one? Which booklet is it?
It should
11?
just be the I don't have my book here with me. It would just be the chapter on vegetable production.
So 11.
I think so.
It just says
Somebody
growing
check for
vegetables in
me.
Tennessee. Growing
Vegetable
vegetables in
production, what
Tennessee.
chapter is that? I don't have them all memorized.
The one I got says 11, growing vegetables in Tennessee home gardens. Is that it?
Yeah, 11. Yeah, chapter 11.
Okay, good. All right, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. All right, well, I guess that wraps us up for tonight. Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Good luck with your surgery.
Thanks.
So if you have the grass that's mixed in with your fescue that you don't want, I mean, you don't want your grass.